The information provided in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional career, legal, financial, or tax advice. Building a career involves inherent risks, and individual results may vary based on industry trends, geographic location, and personal effort. We are not licensed career counselors or financial advisors. Any mention of salary data, industry growth, or historical trends is based on publicly available information and should not be interpreted as a forecast of future performance. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified professionals before making significant life or career transitions. By the time you turn 35, half of everything you know about your industry will be obsolete. Most people believe that their 30s are for coasting on the momentum of their 20s, but the data suggests something far more volatile. We are currently witnessing a massive displacement in the American middle management layer, where traditional experience is being traded for technical agility at an alarming rate. If you are sitting in a cubicle in Chicago or a home office in Austin feeling like you have finally reached a safe plateau, you are actually standing on a melting glacier. The mid-career crisis is no longer about buying a sports car. It is about the sudden realization that the skills which got you here are fundamentally incapable of taking you any further. In the next 10 minutes, we are going to deconstruct why the standard American career ladder is a lie, and how the top 1% of earners in the United States are pivoting their strategy, while everyone else is playing by outdated rules. This video is the definitive blueprint for navigating the high-stakes landscape of the U.S. job market in your 30s. Whether you are aiming for a C-suite promotion, considering a complete industry pivot, or trying to protect your income against the rapid integration of artificial intelligence, we are deep diving into the mechanics of professional leverage. We are solving the problem of the mid-career stagnation trap. Today, you will learn how to audit your current market value, how to build a network that functions as a personal board of directors, and how to transition from a replaceable specialist to an indispensable strategic asset. This is not about working harder. It is about re-engineering your professional identity for a decade that defines your lifetime earning potential. To understand the weight of this decade, we have to look at the historical trends of lifetime earnings. Research indicates that the vast majority of wage growth for college-educated workers in the United States occurs during the first 10 to 15 years of their career. By the time you hit 40, your income trajectory typically begins to flatten. This means your 30s are not just another decade. They are the final window of high-velocity compounding. If you do not maximize your positioning now, you are essentially capping your lifetime wealth. Consider the case of a mid-level project manager in the logistics sector. In their 20s, they gain baseline competency. They learn the software, the jargon, and the office politics. 32, they face a choice. They can continue to execute tasks, becoming the best project manager in their department, or they can begin the process of vertical integration. Vertical integration in a career sense means understanding the financial levers of the entire company. It means moving from being a cost center, someone who costs the company money to employ, to a profit center, someone whose presence directly correlates to revenue growth. In the United States, the distinction between these two roles is the difference between a $60,000 salary and a $200,000 total compensation package. We see this play out in the tech hubs of Silicon Valley and the financial districts of Manhattan. The individuals who thrive are those who stop asking for permission to lead and start providing solutions to problems the executive leadership hasn't even identified yet. This requires a fundamental shift in psychology. You have to stop viewing yourself as an employee and start viewing yourself as a consultant whose primary client happens to be your current employer. Let us look at the data regarding job hopping versus internal promotion. For decades, the American dream was tied to company loyalty. You stayed with one firm, moved up the ranks, and retired with a gold watch. That version of the United States no longer exists. Current labor statistics show that workers who change jobs every 2 to 3 years often see significantly higher salary increases than those who stay with a single employer for a decade. However, in your 30s, this strategy becomes more nuanced. You cannot just jump for a 10% raise anymore. You have to jump for Tier 2 or Tier 3 leverage. Tier 1 leverage is your time. You trade hours for dollars. This is where most people stay stuck. Tier 2 leverage is your expertise. People pay you for what you know, not just what you do. Tier 3 leverage is your network and your capital. In your 30s, if you are still relying solely on Tier 1 leverage, you are in a precarious position. A single health crisis or a corporate restructuring can wipe you out. To build a successful career in this decade, you must actively migrate toward Tier 2 and Tier 3. This migration starts with a ruthless audit of your current skill set. Take a piece of paper and list every skill you have used in the last 6 months. Now go to a major job board like LinkedIn or Indeed and look at the job descriptions for roles that pay double your current salary. Compare the two lists. The gap between them is your roadmap. In the US market, we are seeing a massive demand for T-shaped professionals. These are individuals who have deep, specialized knowledge in one area, but a broad ability to collaborate across various disciplines like data analysis, marketing, and operations. For example, if you are a marketing professional, being good at writing copy is no longer enough to reach the executive level. You need to understand the data science behind customer acquisition costs. You need to understand the legal implications of data privacy laws like the CCPA. You need to be able to speak the language of the finance department to justify your budget. This interdisciplinary approach is what creates job security in an era of automation. You are not just a writer. You are a strategic growth engine. Furthermore, we must address the concept of the invisible resume. In your 20s, your resume is a document of where you went to school and what your titles were. In your 30s, your real resume is your reputation within your industry's ecosystem. This is built through consistent, high-value contributions that exist outside of your daily job requirements. This could be speaking at industry conferences in Las Vegas, publishing thought leadership pieces on platforms like Substack, or mentoring younger professionals within your organization. The goal is to become inbound. Most people spend their lives in an outbound career mode, constantly chasing opportunities, sending out cold applications, and praying for an interview. A successful career in your 30s is defined by the shift to inbound, where opportunities find you because your value is publicly documented. Case studies of successful executives show that by their mid-30s, they rarely apply for jobs through public portals. Instead, they are recruited through private networks because their track record of solving specific, high-value problems is well known. We also need to discuss the geography of success. While remote work has changed the landscape, the United States still operates on clusters. Whether it is biotech in Boston, entertainment in Los Angeles, or energy in Houston, being physically or digitally present in these hubs is non-negotiable for high-tier growth. You need to be where the conversations are happening. If you are working remotely from a small town, you must work twice as hard to maintain your digital presence and professional relevance. This brings us to the importance of the masterclass mindset. In your 30s, you should be spending at least 10% of your income on your own development. This isn't about getting another degree for the sake of letters behind your name. It is about targeted, high-impact learning. If you are in sales, it might be a high-ticket negotiation certification. If you are in engineering, it might be an intensive course on machine learning integration. In the US, the market rewards those who stay at the edge of the innovation curve. If you stop learning at 30, you are professionally dead by 40. Finally, we must touch on the reality of the sunk cost fallacy. Many Americans in their 30s stay in dead-end careers because they feel they have already invested too much time to switch. They have a mortgage in the suburbs, kids in school, and a sense of identity tied to their current role. However, historical trends show that the most successful career trajectories often involve a strategic pivot between the ages of 30 and 38. This is not a blind leap of faith. It is a calculated transition where you carry your transferable skills into a higher growth industry. Over the next 9 parts of this masterclass, we are going to break down the exact mechanics of these pivots, the financial structures you need to support them, and the psychological hurdles you must overcome to claim your seat at the table. We are moving beyond the surface-level advice of follow your passion and entering the realm of cold, hard market dynamics. If you want to be more than just a statistic in the next economic downturn, you need to pay very close attention to what comes next. This is the beginning of your professional transformation. The first pillar of this transformation is the audit of professional utility. In the year 2026, the American labor market has shifted from a credential-based economy to a capability-based economy. To understand where you stand, you must perform a cold, data-driven analysis of your current market value. Most professionals in their 30s make the mistake of measuring their value by their years of experience. In reality, 10 years of experience is often just 1 year of experience repeated 10 times. To break out of this cycle, imagine a professional named Sarah, a 34-year-old operations manager in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sarah has a solid resume, a steady salary of $95,000, and a consistent history of meeting her quarterly goals. On paper, she is successful. However, When Sarah performs a utility audit, she discovers a terrifying trend. 60% of her daily tasks, generating reports, scheduling logistics, and basic data entry, are now being handled by the company's new integrated automation suite. Sarah is not being paid for her experience. She is being paid for a diminishing set of manual interventions. To conduct your own audit, you must categorize every single one of your professional activities into 3 distinct buckets: commodity tasks, high-leverage decisions, and relationship capital. Commodity tasks are anything that can be outsourced to a lower-cost worker or an algorithm. If your day is 80% commodity tasks, your income has a hard ceiling, and your job security is a historical trend waiting to end. High-leverage decisions are choices you make that have a direct, measurable impact on the company's bottom line or operational efficiency. This is where the real money is in the United States. Relationship capital is the strength of your internal and external network, the people who would advocate for you if your current company collapsed tomorrow. For Sarah to survive the 2026 market, she needs to aggressively shift her focus from managing tasks to managing outcomes. She needs to move from being the person who runs the reports to the person who interprets the data to save the company $400,000 in annual shipping overhead. Step 1 of this process is the market value benchmarking. You cannot negotiate from a position of power if you do not know what the market is currently paying for your specific high-leverage decisions. In the U.S., salary transparency laws have expanded significantly, making it easier than ever to see what your peers are earning. Use tools like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, specialized industry salary surveys, and even direct conversations with executive recruiters. Do not look at what you are making now. Look at the job descriptions for the roles 2 levels above you. Identify the exact technical proficiencies and leadership competencies they require. If you are a software engineer in Denver and the roles paying $250,000 require expertise in distributed systems and cross-functional team leadership, and you are currently only writing front-end code, you have identified your growth gap. Step 2 is the skill acquisition sprint. In your 30s, you do not have time for a 4-year degree to learn a new skill. You must utilize high-intensity, specialized training. This is the era of the micro-credential. Whether it is a Google Career Certificate, an industry-specific certification like the PMP or CFA, or a bespoke executive leadership program, the goal is to acquire a signaling mechanism that proves your new utility to the market. Let's go back to Sarah in Charlotte. She spends 6 months mastering supply chain analytics and earning a certification in Lean Six Sigma. Suddenly, she isn't just an operations manager. She is an efficiency specialist. When she presents her next quarterly review, she doesn't talk about how hard she worked. She presents a case study of how her new analytical framework reduced waste by 12%. This leads us to the concept of the internal pivot. Many people think they have to quit their jobs to advance. In the current U.S. corporate climate, the most effective way to jumpstart your 30s is to pivot within your own organization by identifying a high pain point. Every company has a department that is struggling, a project that is failing, or a technical transition that everyone is afraid of. In 2026, many American firms are struggling with the ethical and operational integration of large-scale predictive modeling. If you are the person who steps up and says, "I will take the lead on the implementation of this new system," you have just created immense leverage. You have moved yourself from the replaceable category to the indispensable category. You are taking on the risk the company is afraid of, and historical trends show that those who manage corporate risk are the ones who receive the highest potential outcomes in terms of equity and compensation. Imagine if you stopped viewing your boss as a supervisor and started viewing them as a venture capitalist. Your job is to pitch them on why investing in your new projects will yield a massive return on investment for the firm. This mindset shift is what separates the middle management layer from the executive suite. In the United States, we value the intrapreneur, the person who operates like an entrepreneur within the safety of a corporate structure. This requires you to understand the financial statements of your company. Do you know how your company makes money? Do you know their customer acquisition cost? Do you know their churn rate? If you don't know these numbers, you are flying blind. Building a successful career in your 30s requires you to become a student of the business, not just a student of your job. However, even with the best internal positioning, you must remain market ready. This brings us to the strategic network expansion. In your 20s, networking was about grabbing coffee and collecting business cards. In your 30s, networking is about value exchange. You should be building a personal board of directors. This is a group of 5 to 7 individuals who are 10 to 15 years ahead of you in their careers. They shouldn't be your friends. They should be your mentors and sponsors. A mentor gives you advice. A sponsor mentions your name in rooms you haven't entered yet. To attract these people, you cannot go to them with your hand out. You must offer value first. This might mean providing them with a market research report you've compiled, introducing them to a talent prospect, or offering your specific technical expertise to help them solve a problem in their own firm. Let's look at a case study of a 37-year-old marketing director in Seattle named David. David wanted to move into a chief marketing officer role, but lacked the board-level exposure. Instead of just applying for jobs, David started a small, private dinner series for other marketing leaders in the Pacific Northwest. He didn't ask for anything. He just facilitated the conversation. Within a year, David had built direct relationships with 3 CEOs and 5 venture capitalists. When a high-growth startup needed a new CMO, David didn't have to apply. One of the venture capitalists from his dinner series called him directly. This is how the high-stakes U.S. job market actually works. It is a series of private conversations and recommendations. If you are relying on the public internet to find your next career move, you are competing with 10,000 other people for the scraps. The final piece of this Part 2 puzzle is the financial runway. To make bold career moves in your 30s, you need the financial stability to say no to bad opportunities. In the US, this is often referred to as FU money, but in a professional context, we call it a pivot fund. If you have 6 to 12 months of living expenses saved, you can afford to leave a toxic environment or take a slightly lower base salary at a company with massive equity upside. Without this runway, you are a hostage to your current paycheck, and hostages do not make good career moves. They make desperate moves. We are going to look at how to structure this fund and how to evaluate total compensation, including stock options and performance bonuses, to ensure you are building actual wealth, not just a high salary. But even with a perfect audit, a new skill set, and a powerful network, there is one invisible barrier that destroys more American careers in their 30s than any economic recession or technological shift. It is a psychological trap that makes high achievers settle for mediocrity, just when they should be accelerating. In the next part, we are going to expose this trap and show you the exact framework for the executive rebrand that will change how the world perceives your authority. If you think your hard work will speak for itself, you are about to be passed over for the last time. We are entering the realm of professional perception and the mechanics of the high earner identity. The psychological trap that halts most American careers in their 30s is known as the meritocracy fallacy. In your 20s, you were rewarded for output. You were the person who stayed late, finished the spreadsheets, and cleared the ticket queue. You believed that if you worked harder than everyone else, the promotion would be a natural consequence. However, in the high-stakes corporate environment of 2026, hard work is merely the baseline. It is not the differentiator. If you are still operating as the doer, you are signaling to executive leadership that you are too valuable in your current position to be moved. You have become the victim of your own efficiency. To ascend, you must undergo a radical executive rebrand, moving from a person who executes tasks to a person who commands authority. Imagine a professional named Marcus, a 36-year-old senior software engineer in Austin, Texas. Marcus is objectively the most productive member of his team. He writes cleaner code and solves bugs faster than anyone. Yet, for 3 years, he has been passed over for a director-level role. The feedback he receives is always vague. "You're doing great work, Marcus. We just need to see more leadership." What Marcus doesn't realize is that when he enters a meeting, he still projects the energy of a junior employee. He speaks in technical jargon that the C-suite doesn't care about. He waits for his turn to speak instead of steering the conversation, and his digital presence is non-existent. Marcus is trapped in the authority gap, the distance between how he sees himself and how the decision-makers perceive him. To close this gap, Marcus must implement a strategy of strategic visibility. This starts with a total audit of communication styles. In the United States, executive presence is defined by brevity and bottom-line impact. If you are asked a question in a board meeting, and you start with a 5-minute explanation of the process, you have already lost. The executive rebrand requires you to lead with the conclusion. Historical trends in American leadership show that the most influential figures use a result-first communication framework. Instead of saying, "We spent 6 weeks analyzing the data and found that we might be able to save some money," you say, "We have identified a 14% cost-saving opportunity in our cloud infrastructure. Here is the 3-step implementation plan." By leading with the outcome, you are signaling that you value the time of the executives and that you understand the strategic goals of the business. This rebrand also extends to your digital footprint. In 2026, your LinkedIn profile is not a resume. It is a landing page for your professional brand. Most people in their 30s haven't updated their LinkedIn since their last job search. This is a massive tactical error. High earners use their digital presence to establish social proof. For Marcus, this means shifting his LinkedIn content from looking for opportunities to sharing insights on the future of scalable architecture. By publishing one high-value post a week that addresses a specific industry pain point, Marcus begins to build an air of inevitability. When a headhunter or a CEO looks at his profile, they shouldn't see a guy looking for a promotion. They should see a thought leader who is already operating at the next level. This is the inbound strategy we discussed in Part 2, but applied to your personal identity. The next step in the executive rebrand is the power of strategic silence. In your 20s, you feel the need to prove your intelligence by speaking up constantly. In your 30s, true authority is often found in the ability to listen, synthesize, and provide the final word. Consider the imagine-if scenario where you are in a high-stakes negotiation. The person who speaks first or speaks the most often cedes their leverage. By practicing active synthesis, listening to all perspectives in the room, and then providing a concise, data-driven summary that points toward a solution, you position yourself as the natural leader of the group. You are no longer one of the people arguing over the details. You are the person who resolves the conflict. This shift in perception is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in lifetime earning potential. Let's look at a case study of an account executive named Elena in Chicago. At 33, Elena felt she was being treated like a support staff member despite her high sales numbers. She realized her brand was too helpful and not authoritative enough. She began a 90-day rebrand. First, she changed her visual authority. In the hybrid world of 2026, this meant upgrading her home office setup to professional-grade lighting and audio, ensuring she looked like a high-level consultant during every Zoom call. Second, she started saying no to low-value tasks that weren't in her job description. When asked to organize an office party, she politely declined, citing her focus on a high-value client acquisition strategy. Third, she began managing up by sending weekly, bulleted updates to her VP that focused exclusively on revenue-generating activities. Within 6 months, the perception of Elena changed from the helpful salesperson to the future head of sales. She didn't work more hours. She changed the narrative of her work. To sustain this rebrand, you must also master the language of risk. Most employees are risk-averse. They want to keep their jobs and avoid mistakes. Executives, however, are paid to manage risk. To be perceived as an executive, you must stop talking about staying safe and start talking about calculated bets. This doesn't mean being reckless. It means using data to quantify potential outcomes. When you propose a new initiative, you must present the risk of inaction. In the US market, the fear of falling behind competitors is often a stronger motivator than the hope of moving ahead. If you can demonstrate that the company will lose market share by not following your lead, you have created an irresistible proposition. Furthermore, we must address the concept of professional distance. In your 30s, you have to transition from being one of the team to being a leader of the team. This is a difficult transition for many because it involves a change in social dynamics. You cannot be everyone's best friend if you are the one responsible for their performance reviews and professional growth. Successful leaders in their 30s establish a boundary that is built on mutual respect rather than social validation. This doesn't mean being cold, it means being clear. Clear expectations, clear feedback, and clear boundaries. Historical trends suggest that the most effective managers are those who are viewed as fair and demanding, rather than nice and easy. The executive rebrand is not a one-time event. It is a continuous calibration. Every 6 months you should ask yourself, if I were to interview for my dream job today, would my current actions and reputation support that move? If the answer is no, you are stagnating. In 2026, with the speed of industry disruption, stagnation is the equivalent of a career death sentence. You must treat your professional identity like a product that requires constant updates and marketing. We have now covered the audit of your utility and the rebranding of your authority. But there is a third, even more powerful force that dictates who gets the corner office and who gets the pink slip. It's a concept that most people find uncomfortable because it feels like office politics, but in reality, it is the fundamental physics of the American workplace. It is the invisible map of power and influence. In the next part, we are going to dive into the political architecture of the US corporation. We will show you how to identify the real decision makers, how to build political capital without losing your integrity, and how to survive a regime change when a new CEO enters the building. If you think your executive rebrand is enough to protect you, you haven't seen how the real game is played behind closed doors. We are going to reveal the rules they don't teach you in MBA programs. To master the professional landscape of the United States in 2026, you must understand that every corporation operates on two distinct planes: the visible hierarchy and the invisible power map. The visible hierarchy is the organizational chart you see in the employee handbook, the neat rows of boxes and lines connecting the CEO to the VPs, directors, and managers. The invisible power map, however, is the actual nervous system of the company. It is defined by who has the ear of the decision makers, who controls the flow of critical information, and who possesses the veto power that never appears in a job description. In your 30s, ignoring this political architecture is not a sign of integrity. It is a sign of professional immaturity. Historical trends in American business suggest that technical brilliance often takes a backseat to political intelligence when it comes to high-level promotions. To move into the upper echelons of your industry, you must learn to navigate this corporate physics without losing your ethical North Star. Imagine a professional named James, a 38-year-old lead strategist at a major fintech firm in Charlotte. James is excellent at his job, and his executive rebrand is flawless. But a new chief operating officer is hired from a rival firm. Within 3 months, half of James's peers are transitioning out of the company. James survives and is eventually promoted. Why? Because James understood the mechanics of regime change. He didn't wait for an introductory meeting. He had already mapped out the new COO's professional history. He identified the gatekeepers the new executive brought with them, the administrative assistants and chief of staff who hold the real power over the executive's calendar. James didn't suck up. He made himself a source of institutional intelligence. He provided the new leadership with the historical context of failed projects, not to gossip, but to prevent them from making the same mistakes. He became a political asset. The first step in mastering this architecture is stakeholder mapping. You must create a literal grid of every person who can influence your career trajectory. On the vertical axis, plot their power, their ability to move resources or change your status. On the horizontal axis, plot their interest, how much they care about your specific department or projects. In the United States corporate culture, you will often find shadow influencers. These are individuals with low formal power but extremely high interest and influence. For example, the senior paralegal who has been with the firm for 20 years or the IT director who knows where every security vulnerability is hidden. If you ignore these people, you are building your career on sand. Potential outcomes of a poor stakeholder map include being blindsided by a project cancellation that seemed like a done deal, because you failed to account for a low-interest/high-power executive who felt out of the loop. Once you have mapped the power, you must begin building political capital. Think of this as an invisible bank account. You deposit capital by solving problems for others, sharing credit, and providing early warnings. If you see a deadline that is going to be missed in another department, and you quietly alert the lead of that department before it becomes a public crisis, you have made a massive deposit. In 2026, the currency of the American workplace is no longer just money. It is reduced friction. Everyone is overwhelmed by the speed of change. If you are the person who reduces friction for others, you become a high-value node. Case studies of successful mid-career pivots show that those who have high political capital can often bypass traditional HR hurdles. When a new role opens up, the informal board of directors within the company already has a consensus on who should fill it. Your goal is to be the consensus. This brings us to the Regime Change Survival Guide. In the current economic climate of 2026, mergers, acquisitions, and executive turnovers are happening at a record pace. When a new leader arrives, they are usually looking for 3 things: loyalty, competence, and institutional knowledge. Most people lead with competence, but in a regime change, loyalty and knowledge are often more valuable initially. This does not mean blind sycophancy. It means strategic alignment. You must be the first to adopt the new leader's terminology and goals. If the new CEO is obsessed with operational resilience, every one of your reports and presentations should use that phrase. You are signaling that you are part of the new world order, not a relic of the old one. Consider another imagine-if scenario. You are a 35-year-old manager, and your company is being acquired. The new owners are looking to trim the fat. Those who hide in their offices and wait for instructions are the first to go. Those who proactively reach out to the integration team with a Day 100 efficiency report are the ones who get retained. In the United States, we value the self-starter who thinks like an owner. By anticipating the needs of the new regime, you shift from being a cost to be cut to an asset to be integrated. Historical trends show that the first 90 days of a new leadership tenure are the most critical window for establishing your new political standing. If you miss this window, you are likely to be labeled as legacy talent, which is a corporate euphemism for expendable. However, building political capital requires a delicate balance. You must avoid the sycophant trap. If you are seen as someone who only agrees with the person in power, you lose your credibility as an expert. True political power in your 30s comes from being the honest broker. You are the person who can tell the boss the hard truth in a way that is constructive and private. This is the ultimate Tier 2 leverage. When an executive trusts your judgment enough to hear no from you, you have achieved a level of job security that no contract can provide. This is how you survive the quiet layoffs that are becoming more common in the US tech and service sectors. To execute this, you need a network of proxies. You shouldn't always be the one blowing your own horn. Your political capital is most effective when it is spent by others on your behalf. This is achieved through reciprocal mentorship. Find a peer in a different department, finance if you are in marketing, legal if you are in sales. Agree to be each other's internal PR. When you are in a meeting where they are not present, you mention their recent win. They do the same for you. This creates a chorus of competence that reaches the ears of leadership from multiple directions. It looks organic, but it is highly strategic. In the 2026 job market, social proof within the company is the strongest shield against displacement. We have now deconstructed the utility of your skills, the branding of your authority, and the invisible map of your organization's power. But there is a final layer to this career masterclass that most people completely ignore until it is too late. It is the concept of economic moats for the individual. Just as a business builds a moat to protect itself from competitors, you must build a moat to protect your income and your autonomy from the volatility of the American economy. Most people think their salary is their wealth, but in your 30s, your salary is actually your greatest risk if it is your only source of leverage. In the next part, we are going to dive into the financial architecture of a high-performance career. We aren't talking about basic budgeting. We are talking about the wealth-to-work ratio. We will show you how to structure your compensation packages to include equity leverage, how to use your professional reputation to create secondary income streams that don't violate your non-compete, and how to prepare for the mid-career pivot that could double your net worth in less than 3 years. If you are still just waiting for a 3% annual raise, you are losing money every single day. We are going to show you how the top 5% of American earners actually play the financial game. The financial architecture of a successful career in your 30s is not built on a higher salary. It is built on the concept of personal economic moats. In the United States, by the time you reach 2026, the inflation-adjusted value of a standard white-collar salary has faced significant pressure. If you are relying solely on a bi-weekly paycheck, you are in a state of high fragility. The top 5% of earners in America do not view their job as a destination. They view it as a liquidity event and a platform for equity accumulation. To play the financial game at this level, you must understand the wealth-to-work ratio. This is the measure of how much of your net worth is derived from your active labor versus how much is generated by your professional assets. In your 20s, this ratio is almost 100% labor. By the end of your 30s, if you haven't shifted at least 20% of that weight to assets, you are losing the race against time and automation. Imagine a professional named Robert, a 39-year-old product lead in Seattle. Robert earns a high base salary of $240,000. To the outside world, he is wealthy, but Robert lives in a high-cost area, has a significant mortgage, and his total compensation is heavily weighted toward cash. When a market correction hits the tech sector in early 2026, Robert's firm freezes all bonuses. Because Robert didn't negotiate for equity, restricted stock units or RSUs, he has no upside protection. He has traded his most valuable years for flat cash that is losing purchasing power. Contrast this with his peer, Sarah, who negotiated a lower base salary in exchange for a performance-based equity stake. As her department grew, her equity value compounded. Sarah isn't just an employee. She has a capital interest in the company's success. To build your own economic moat, The first step is the total compensation deconstruction. Most Americans only look at the base number on their offer letter. High performers look at the 4 pillars of compensation: base salary, performance bonuses, equity/stock options, and specialized benefits like 401k matching or deferred compensation plans. In your 30s, your goal should be to maximize the equity pillar. This is because in the U.S. tax code, long-term capital gains are historically taxed at a lower rate than ordinary income. By shifting your compensation toward equity, you are not just earning more, you are keeping more. This is how historical trends show the widening gap between the working class and the investing class within the same corporate office. The second step is creating professional secondary income. This is often misunderstood as a side hustle, like driving for a rideshare app. At the mid-career level, your secondary income must be a derivative of your primary expertise. Imagine if you are a senior project manager. Your secondary income shouldn't be selling trinkets online. It should be acting as a fractional consultant for startups that cannot afford a full-time hire, but need your high-level strategic systems. In 2026, the fractional executive market in the United States is exploding. Companies are increasingly looking for surgical expertise, bringing in a specialist for 5 hours a month to solve a specific problem. By establishing yourself as a fractional expert, you create a revenue diversification strategy. If your main job disappears, you already have 3 or 4 micro-clients that keep your cash flow positive while you hunt for the next big role. Step 3 is the non-compete and intellectual property audit. Before you start building these secondary streams, you must conduct a rigorous legal review of your employment contract. In the United States, the legal landscape regarding non-compete agreements has shifted significantly, with many states like California leading the way in restricting their scope. However, you must ensure that the work you do outside your 9-to-5 does not utilize company resources, proprietary data, or trade secrets. Case studies of terminated executives often highlight a failure to separate company IP from personal expertise. To protect yourself, document your prior works and ensure your secondary consulting is in a non-competing niche. For instance, if you work in healthcare tech, your secondary consulting could be in general organizational leadership for nonprofits. This allows you to build your wealth-to-work ratio without risking your primary liquidity event. Let's look at a potential outcome scenario for a 34-year-old marketing specialist named Chloe in Atlanta. Chloe realizes her market moat is her deep knowledge of consumer behavior in the Southeast. Instead of just doing her job, she starts a newsletter that analyzes regional retail trends. She doesn't charge for it initially, but she uses it to build a massive relationship capital list. Within 2 years, she has 3 retail chains paying her for quarterly trend briefings. Her wealth-to-work ratio begins to shift. She is now earning an extra $40,000 a year from her expertise derivatives. This money isn't spent on lifestyle inflation. It is funneled into a pivot fund, a dedicated investment account designed to fund her next major career transition or a potential business launch. The pivot fund is your ultimate leverage. In the high-pressure environment of 2026, the most dangerous position to be in is financial desperation. If you need your next paycheck to pay your mortgage, you cannot negotiate a promotion effectively. You will accept low-leverage tasks because you are afraid to rock the boat. But if you have 18 months of expenses in your pivot fund, your body language in meetings changes. You speak with the authority of the unfireable. You can propose the high-risk, high-reward projects we discussed in Part 4, because you are not afraid of the downside risk. Ironically, the less you need the job, the more valuable you become to the company, because you are the only one willing to speak the truth. Furthermore, you must master the tax efficiency of the high earner. As your income increases in your 30s, you will hit the tax cliff. In the United States, this is where every additional dollar earned is taxed at a significantly higher marginal rate. To combat this, you must utilize legal tax abatement strategies. This includes maximizing health savings accounts, HSAs, which offer a triple tax advantage, and investigating mega backdoor Roth strategies if your company's 401k plan allows for after-tax contributions. This isn't just finance stuff, this is career defense. If you earn $200,000 but take home only $120,000 after taxes and inefficiencies, you are working 4 months out of the year for free. A successful career strategist in 2026 views their tax return as a profit and loss statement for their personal brand. Finally, we must address the lifestyle creep trap. The historical trend for American professionals in their 30s is to immediately spend the raise. You get a $20,000 promotion, and you buy a car with a $500 monthly payment. You have just traded your professional autonomy for a depreciating asset. To build an economic moat, you must maintain a delayed gratification framework. Your lifestyle should always be 2 career steps behind your current income. If you are a director, live like a manager. If you are a VP, live like a director. This delta between your income and your expenses is the raw material for your freedom. We have now mapped out the financial fortifications of your career. You have the skills, the brand, the political map, and the financial runway. You are now part of the elite tier of professionals who are market-proof. But there is one final physiological hurdle that destroys even the most well-prepared American earners. It is the silent killer of the high-performance career, the mid-career burnout. In the next part, we are going to dive into biological optimization. We will discuss how to manage the intense stress of the 2026 corporate world, how to structure your deep work to produce 10x results in 4 hours, and why your sleep architecture is more important than your MBA when it comes to long-term earning power. If you think you can just grind your way through your 30s, you are about to hit a wall that no amount of money can fix. We are going to show you how to build a career that lasts 40 years, not just 4. The biological reality of the human body in its 4th decade is the most overlooked variable in the American career equation. In your 20s, you could rely on raw stamina, fueled by high metabolism and a brain that was still finalizing its neural pruning. You could pull all-nighters in a New York bullpen or a Palo Alto garage and recover with a double espresso and 4 hours of sleep. But as you cross the threshold into your 30s, the biological wall begins to form. This is not a failure of will. It is a shift in neurochemistry and metabolic efficiency. In the 2026 corporate environment, where the pace of digital transformation has reached a fever pitch, the grind culture that got you to a mid-level position will actively prevent you from reaching the executive suite. To build a career that lasts 40 years, you must transition from a strategy of linear effort to one of biological optimization. Imagine a professional named Michael, a 36-year-old vice president of sales in Chicago. In 2026, Michael is managing a distributed team across 3 time zones. He is working 70 hours a week, surviving on 6 hours of fragmented sleep, and constantly tethered to his Neuralink interface and smartphone. Despite his high salary, Michael's cognitive performance is trending downward. He finds himself rereading the same emails 3 times. He is irritable in high-stakes negotiations, and his ability to synthesize complex market data is faltering. Michael is experiencing cognitive deceleration caused by chronic allostatic load, the wear and tear on the body that accumulates when an individual is exposed to repeated or chronic stress. For Michael and for you, the solution isn't a new time management app. It is a fundamental restructuring of your biological operating system. The first pillar of this system is the implementation of deep work protocols. In the United States, the average office worker is interrupted every 11 minutes, and it takes an average of 23 minutes to return to the original task with full focus. This attention residue is a productivity killer. High performers in their 30s combat this by designing non-linear workdays. Instead of an 8-hour block of constant busyness, they utilize 90-minute sprints of deep focus. During these windows, all notifications are silenced, and the environment is optimized for a single, high-leverage task. Historical trends among top-tier CEOs show that 3 to 4 hours of truly deep, uninterrupted work produce higher quality output than 12 hours of fragmented, shallow work. By 2026, the ability to concentrate deeply is becoming the rarest, and therefore the most valuable skill in the American economy. Step 2 is the mastery of sleep architecture. In the past, sleep was viewed as a luxury. Today, it is recognized as a neurological cleaning service. During deep sleep, the brain's glymphatic system clears out metabolic waste products that accumulate during the day. For a 30-something executive, losing even 90 minutes of sleep can result in a 30% reduction in cognitive flexibility the following day. To optimize your executive decision-making, you must view sleep as a non-negotiable professional requirement. This means managing your circadian alignment. Potential outcomes of viewing sleep as a performance enhancer include improved emotional regulation in high-stress meetings and enhanced long-term memory consolidation. Case studies of professional athletes in the U.S. have shown that increasing sleep duration directly correlates with better decision-making under pressure. The same principle applies to the corporate boardroom. Let's look at a potential outcome scenario for a 34-year-old lead designer in Austin named Sophia. Sophia realized that her best creative work happened between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m., but she was spending those hours answering low-priority Slacks and attending status update meetings. She implemented a digital blackout until 10:30 a.m. every morning. She used her peak biological window for high-leverage design strategy. By the time she opened her email, she had already completed her most important task for the day. Her stress levels plummeted because she was no longer chasing her to-do list. She was leading it. This is energy management, rather than time management. You must audit your energy levels throughout the day and match your most difficult tasks to your highest energy windows. The third pillar is stress inoculation and the recovery cycle. In your 30s, chronic stress leads to elevated cortisol levels, which have been linked in historical data to brain fog and the degradation of the hippocampus, the area of the brain responsible for learning and memory. To sustain a high-level career, you must build recovery anchors into your week. This isn't about a 2-week vacation once a year. It is about micro-recoveries every 24 hours. This could include physiological size to reset the nervous system, Zone 2 cardiovascular exercise to improve mitochondrial health, or complete digital disconnection during dinner. In the United States, we are seeing a shift where the most successful professionals are those who are physically resilient. They treat their bodies like elite instruments because they realize that their brain is a biological organ that requires specific inputs to function at a high level. Imagine if you viewed your professional life through the lens of a professional athlete. An NBA player doesn't practice 24 hours a day. They practice intensely, then they recover intensely. Your career in your 30s requires the same cadence. If you are always on, you are never actually at your best. The imagine if scenario here is powerful. Imagine if you could achieve double your current career results while working 20% fewer hours, simply by optimizing your biological output. This is not a fantasy. It is the reality for those who understand the science of high performance. Furthermore, we must address nutritional cognitive support. In 2026, the link between the gut microbiome and cognitive function, the gut-brain axis, is well documented. A diet high in ultra-processed foods, common in many American fast-paced environments, leads to systemic inflammation, which directly impacts mental clarity. To maintain your executive edge, you must view food as information for your cells. Stable blood sugar levels are essential for maintaining focus throughout a 4-hour board meeting or a complex technical audit. The historical trend is clear. The leaders who maintain their peak performance well into their 50s and 60s are those who began prioritizing their biological health in their 30s. The final piece of biological optimization is environmental design. Your physical surroundings in your 2026 home office or corporate suite dictate your neurobiology. Factors such as CO2 levels, light temperature, and even the presence of fractal patterns in nature have a measurable impact on your cognitive load. If you are working in a dimly lit, poorly ventilated room, your brain is working harder just to stay awake. By optimizing your physical environment, using high CRI lighting that mimics the sun, ensuring proper ventilation, and using ergonomic furniture that promotes blood flow, you are reducing the biological friction of your workday. We have now covered the internal engine of your career, your biology. We have deconstructed how to work with your body rather than against it. You have the utility, the brand, the political map, the financial moat, and now the biological stamina to reach the top. But even the most optimized professional can be derailed by a lack of one specific, high-level skill that is rarely taught in schools, but governs every single transaction in the United States. It is the ability to influence others without formal authority. In the next part, we are going to dive into the art of advanced negotiation and persuasion. We will show you the FBI-level communication techniques used by the top 1% to close deals, resolve conflicts, and get the yes when everyone else is hearing no. If you think you've been negotiating well so far, wait until you see the psychological triggers that actually move the needle in 2026. We are moving from biology to the deep psychology of influence. In the high-velocity economic climate of 2026, the most significant bottleneck to your professional advancement isn't your technical proficiency or your biological stamina. It is your ability to navigate the complex psychological terrain of human interaction. We call this the deep psychology of influence. In your 20s, you were likely taught that negotiation is a zero-sum game, a tug-of-war where one person wins and the other loses. You might have focused on hard bargaining or splitting the difference. However, historical trends in behavioral economics and hostage negotiation research suggest that these old-school methods are fundamentally flawed. They create resentment and lead to suboptimal outcomes. To excel in your 30s, you must master tactical empathy. This is not about being nice. It is about the emotional intelligence required to understand the perspective of your counterpart so thoroughly that you can influence their behavior to reach a mutually beneficial conclusion. Imagine a professional named David, a 35-year-old creative director in Los Angeles. David is in a high-stakes meeting with a major client who is threatening to pull a multi-million-dollar contract due to a minor delay in delivery. A traditional negotiator might apologize profusely or offer a desperate discount. Instead, David uses the accusation audit. Before the client can even start their tirade, David says, "It probably looks like we are being completely disorganized, that we don't value your timeline, and that we've been irresponsible with your budget." By labeling the negative emotions before they are expressed, David effectively disarms the client's amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for the fight or flight response. The client, feeling understood, lowers their guard, shifting the conversation from conflict to collaborative problem-solving. This is the difference between losing a career-defining account and strengthening a long-term partnership. The first step in this psychological framework is the use of labels. A label is a concise statement that identifies an emotion or a dynamic. In 2026, when everyone is overwhelmed by data, the person who can name the elephant in the room gains immediate authority. You use phrases like, "It seems like there is a lot of pressure to get this right," or, "It sounds like you are worried about how this will look to the board." Notice that these are not questions. Questions feel like an interrogation. Labels feel like an observation. When you label correctly, your counterpart will often respond with, "That's right." In negotiation psychology, "That's right" is the most powerful phrase you can hear. It signifies that the other person feels heard and understood, which is the prerequisite for any meaningful persuasion. The second step is mirroring. This is a simple but profound technique where you repeat the last 1 to 3 critical words of what your counterpart just said, but with an inquisitive tone. If your boss says, "We just don't have the budget for a salary increase this year," you respond with, "Don't have the budget?" This prompts them to elaborate, often revealing the real underlying constraints. Perhaps the budget isn't the problem, but rather the headcount allocation for the next fiscal quarter. By mirroring, you gather intelligence without being aggressive. You allow the other person to talk themselves into a corner, or better yet, reveal the path to a solution you hadn't considered. Case studies of top American executives show that the most successful leaders talk less and listen more, using mirrors to keep the information flowing. This leads us to the power of no. Most people are terrified of the word no. They strive for a yes at all costs, which often leads to counterfeit yes, where the other person agrees just to get you to stop talking, but has no intention of following through. In the deep psychology of influence, we flip this on its head. We want to invite a no. A no makes people feel safe and in control. Instead of asking, "Is this a good time to talk?" which puts people on the defensive, you ask, "Is now a bad time to talk?" If they say no, they have given themselves permission to engage with you. In a salary negotiation, instead of asking, "Can you increase my pay?" you might ask, "Is it totally out of the question to look at a performance-based equity adjustment?" If the answer is no, the door is wide open for a detailed discussion. Step 3 is the calibrated question. These are how and what questions that remove the why from the equation. Why sounds like an accusation. If you ask a team member, "Why is this project late?" they will provide excuses. If you ask, "What about this project is causing the most significant friction for the team?" or "How am I supposed to explain this delay to the stakeholders?" you are enlisting them as a partner in solving the problem. In your 30s, your role shifts from problem solver to problem framer. By using calibrated questions, you force the other person to do the mental work of finding a solution that works for you. You are subtly guiding them toward your desired outcome while making them feel like it was their idea. This is the ultimate form of influence in the U.S. corporate structure. Imagine if you use these techniques not just for big negotiations, but in every interaction, from your performance reviews to your daily stand-ups. The potential outcomes are staggering. You begin to be perceived as someone who is exceptionally easy to work with and emotionally mature. In 2026, where technical skills are being commoditized by AI, these human-centric skills are your greatest differentiator. Historical trends show that as you move up the ladder, your job becomes 10% technical and 90% psychological. You are no longer managing code or spreadsheets. You are managing the fears, egos, and aspirations of other human beings. Let's look at a case study of a 38-year-old operations lead named Marcus in Denver. Marcus was facing a regime change, where his new manager was known for being abrasive and micromanaging. Instead of resisting, Marcus used an accusation audit in their very first meeting. He said, "I know you've heard that this department is set in its ways and that I might be resistant to the new changes you want to implement." The manager was stunned. By verbalizing the manager's unspoken fears, Marcus built more trust in 10 minutes than most people build in 10 months. He then used calibrated questions to understand the manager's definition of success. By the end of the first month, Marcus wasn't being micromanaged. He was the manager's most trusted advisor. Furthermore, we must address the psychology of authority. In the United States, authority is often signaled through nonverbal dominance. This doesn't mean being a bully. It means occupying space, maintaining eye contact, and using a late-night FM DJ voice, a calm, downward-inflecting tone that projects confidence. When you speak with this tone, people subconsciously assume you know what you are talking about. If you speak with an upward inflection at the end of your sentences, you sound like you are asking for permission. In your 30s, you must stop asking for permission to be an expert. You must inhabit the role. Your voice is a tool. Learn to play it like a professional. But there is a dark side to this. We must also discuss the psychological defense against manipulation. In a competitive U.S. market, you will encounter individuals who use these same techniques for nefarious ends. You must learn to recognize gaslighting, moving the goalposts, and triangulation. By understanding the mechanics of influence, you become immune to them. You can call out the behavior in a professional, labeled way. It seems like the requirements for this project have shifted 3 times in the last week. It sounds like we might not be aligned on the core objective. This stops the manipulator in their tracks without you becoming the aggressor. We have now unlocked the psychological secrets of the top 1% of earners. You know how to mirror, label, audit, and calibrate. You are now a master of the human interface. But even with these skills, there is one final massive transition that defines the second half of your 30s. It is the move from individual contributor to system architect. Most people get stuck being the best player on the field. To reach the true peaks of the American career, you have to stop playing the game and start designing the league. In the next part, we are going to dive into scaling your impact. We will show you how to build teams that operate without you, how to create process moats that make your department the most efficient in the company, and why firing yourself from your daily tasks is the only way to get the ultimate promotion. If you are still doing the work yourself, you aren't leading, you're just a high-paid laborer. We are going to show you how to become a force multiplier. This is where your career moves from linear growth to exponential impact. The transition from being a high-performing individual contributor to becoming a force multiplier is the single most difficult psychological hurdle for ambitious professionals in their late 30s. In the United States, we are culturally conditioned to celebrate the hustler, the person who does it all, the one with the most unread emails, the one who is indispensable, because they hold all the keys. However, in the high-stakes economy of 2026, being indispensable is actually a career liability. If a department cannot function without your constant manual intervention, you have not built a career. You have built a cage. To scale your impact exponentially, you must adopt the mindset of a system architect. You must move from being the person who plays the instrument to the person who conducts the orchestra, and eventually the person who writes the score. This requires a ruthless commitment to firing yourself from your daily tasks, so you can focus on the architectural decisions that drive 10 times the value. Imagine a professional named Jason, a 37-year-old director of logistics in Columbus, Ohio. Jason is brilliant at troubleshooting supply chain disruptions. In 2026, with the increasing volatility in global shipping routes, Jason is a firefighter. He spends 60 hours a week manually overriding automated routing systems, talking down angry vendors, and personally supervising warehouse shifts. To his peers, Jason is a hero. To the executive leadership, Jason is a bottleneck. Because Jason is the only one who knows the secret sauce of the logistics department, he can never be promoted to vice president. The company cannot afford to move him because the department would collapse. Jason is a linear worker. His output is tied directly to his hours. To become a force multiplier, Jason needs to stop solving individual problems and start building the system of solutions. Step 1 in this transformation is the delegation and systemization audit. You must look at every recurring task on your calendar and ask one question. How can I make this task independent of my physical presence? In the 2026 American workforce, this involves a combination of human delegation and technical automation. For Jason, this meant creating a decision tree for his team. Instead of the team coming to him for every routing change, he documented the logic he used to make those choices. He built a standard operating procedure (SOP) that transformed his gut instinct into a repeatable algorithm. Historical trends show that departments with documented, scalable processes have a 40% higher operational efficiency than those relying on star performers. By documenting his knowledge, Jason began the process of firing himself from the role of firefighter. Step 2 is the creation of process moats. A process moat is a system you design that is so efficient and so integrated into the company's DNA that it becomes a proprietary asset. Imagine if you are a marketing manager. Instead of just running great campaigns, you build a content engine, a system of freelance writers, automated SEO triggers, and data feedback loops that produces leads while you sleep. In 2026, the system is the value. When you build a system, you are no longer selling your time, you are selling the output of a machine you designed. This is how you achieve exponential impact. Case studies of successful chief operating officers in the US often reveal that they didn't get there by being the best at operations. They got there by being the best at designing operational systems that anyone could run. The third step is mentorship as leverage. Most people view mentorship as a philanthropic activity, a way to give back. High-level career strategists view mentorship as talent scaling. In your 30s, your ability to identify, recruit, and develop talent is your most valuable currency. If you can take a junior employee and, through your guidance, turn them into a mid-level performer in 6 months, you have just multiplied your own capacity. Imagine if you have a team of 5 people, and through your mentorship, each of them becomes 20% more efficient. You have effectively added a 6th person to the team without increasing the payroll. This is the force multiplier math. In the 2026 US job market, leaders of leaders are the individuals who command the highest compensation packages and the most equity. They are not paid for what they do. They are paid for what the people they have trained can do. Let's look at a potential outcome scenario for a 36-year-old senior financial analyst named Maya in New York City. Maya realized she was spending 10 hours a week manually cleaning data for her quarterly reports. Instead of continuing this linear effort, she spent 2 weeks training a junior analyst and building a custom AI prompt library to automate the data cleaning process. She didn't just hand off the work. She built a quality control dashboard that allowed her to review the work in 10 minutes rather than 10 hours. Maya fired herself from data cleaning. She used those 10 reclaimed hours to perform high-leverage analysis, identifying a tax incentive opportunity that saved her firm $3 million. Maya's value to the firm didn't just grow. It exploded. She was no longer a cost center doing manual labor. She was a profit engine driving strategic growth. Furthermore, we must address the psychology of control. The reason most American professionals fail to scale is the fear of losing control. They worry that if they aren't involved in every detail, the quality will suffer. To overcome this, you must implement guardrail governance. Instead of checking the work at the end, you design the boundaries within which the team operates. You define the definition of done and the quality standards. In 2026, the most effective managers use asynchronous accountability. They don't micromanage, they look at the metrics. If the metrics are within the guardrails, they stay out of the way. This gives the team autonomy, which historical trends show is the #1 driver of employee retention in the United States. And it gives you the mental bandwidth to look 6 to 12 months into the future. This leads us to strategic foresight. When you are no longer buried in the day-to-day, your job description changes. Your new responsibility is to scan the horizon for threats and opportunities. While everyone else is focused on this week's deadlines, the system architect is looking at how the 2027 interest rate shifts will impact the company's expansion plans. They are looking at emerging competitors in the green tech space. They are building relationships with potential acquisition targets. This is Tier 3 leverage. By the time the rest of the team sees the problem, the architect has already designed the solution. This invisible leadership is what makes you an indispensable strategic asset to the CEO and the board of directors. However, scaling your impact also requires a cultural infrastructure. You cannot build a high-performing system in a toxic or stagnant environment. You must become the chief culture officer of your own department. This means hiring for cultural contribution, rather than just cultural fit. It means fostering an environment where radical candor is the norm, where the team feels safe enough to tell you when your systems are failing. In the 2026 US economy, the war for talent is intense. People don't leave companies, they leave bad systems and bad leaders. By building a system of excellence that empowers others, you become a talent magnet. High performers will actively seek to work for you because they know that being on your team is a career accelerator for them. We have now explored how to automate your utility, scale your impact, and become a system architect who drives exponential value. You have the skills, the brand, the political capital, the financial moat, the biological stamina, and the psychological influence to dominate your field. But there is a final, critical piece of the puzzle. It is the transition from success to significance. In the final stages of your 30s, you must begin to think about your professional legacy. In the next part, we are going to dive into the art of the long game. We will discuss how to build a career that doesn't just peak at 40, but continues to compound for decades. We will show you how to transition into board-level advisory, how to build a personal intellectual property portfolio, and how to ensure that you are the one who chooses when and how you exit the game. If you think the scaling phase is the end of the journey, you are missing the most rewarding part of the American career path. We are going to show you how to become unretirable. This is where you move from professional impact to industrial influence. Industrial influence is the final evolution of the American careerist, a state where your value is no longer tied to a specific payroll or a single corporate entity. It is the transition from being a successful practitioner to becoming a pillar of your industry. In the United States of 2026, this is achieved through the construction of a personal intellectual property portfolio. Most professionals in their late 30s make the mistake of leaving their best ideas inside the companies they work for. They write brilliant internal memos, design innovative workflows, and solve complex problems, but they leave the ownership of that logic behind when they switch jobs. To become unretirable, you must begin to externalize your expertise. This doesn't mean violating your non-disclosure agreements. It means identifying the universal principles behind your success and codifying them into a public-facing framework. Imagine a professional named Anthony, a 39-year-old cybersecurity architect based in Washington, D.C. In 2026, the American regulatory landscape for data privacy has undergone a massive shift with the implementation of the Federal Algorithmic Accountability Act. Anthony spent years managing internal security for a mid-sized financial firm. While his peers were focused solely on their internal tickets, Anthony started documenting the physics of compliance in the age of generative AI. He began publishing high-level white papers on how regional banks could navigate these new federal mandates without quadrupling their overhead. He didn't share trade secrets. He shared a methodology. Within 18 months, Anthony wasn't just an employee. He was a standard setter. When the Department of Commerce needed an industry advisor for a new task force, they didn't look for a manager. They looked for the man who wrote the framework. Anthony's potential outcomes shifted from a 5% annual raise to a career defined by advisory seats and speaking engagements that paid more per hour than his previous weekly salary. The first step in building this level of influence is the logic extraction. You must look back at your biggest wins over the last decade and ask, what was the repeatable formula I used to solve this? If you saved a company from a PR disaster, what was the 5-step response matrix you developed? If you scaled a sales team from 10 to 100, what was the recursive hiring model you implemented? In the US market, we value packaging. A person with a solution is a laborer. A person with a system is a consultant. By naming your process, giving it a distinct identity like the Resilient Operations Framework or the Hyperscale Talent Protocol, you create a piece of intellectual property that you carry with you throughout your career. This is the foundation of your industrial moat. The second step is the move into board-level advisory. In your late 30s, you are entering the golden age of board eligibility. In 2026, American boards of directors are desperately seeking digital natives and strategic technologists to offset the aging demographics of traditional governance. Most professionals think board seats are reserved for retired CEOs. Historical trends show that skill-specific board seats are the fastest-growing segment of the governance market. To prepare for this, you must shift your resume from a list of responsibilities to a list of governances. You need to demonstrate that you can think about risk, compliance, and long-term shareholder value, rather than just quarterly KPIs. Step by step, this transition begins with a pro bono board seat. You identify a high-impact nonprofit or a local municipal board in your city, whether it's the Seattle Chamber of Commerce or a Houston-based tech incubator. You offer your strategic oversight for free. This allows you to learn the language of the boardroom, the specific way financial audits are reviewed, how executive compensation is debated, and how to navigate the duty of care and duty of loyalty. After 2 years of nonprofit governance, you are no longer an aspirant, you are a seasoned director. This makes you a prime candidate for private company boards or advisory boards for high-growth startups. In the United States, a single private board seat can provide not only a significant annual retainer, but also equity kickers that compound into substantial wealth over time. This leads us to industrial diplomacy. This is the practice of building relationships with your competitors, regulators, and industry journalists. In your 30s, you should stop viewing your rivals as enemies and start viewing them as competitors. You want to be the person who can pick up the phone and talk to the head of strategy at your biggest competitor. Why? Because in 2026, the most significant industry shifts happen through consortiums. Whether it's setting new standards for green energy in Texas or ethical AI in California, the people in the room are those with the highest industrial diplomacy scores. By participating in industry associations and standard-setting bodies, you move your reputation from the company level to the industry level. You become the person who everyone knows in the field. Imagine if you were the individual who brokered the partnership between 3 rival logistics firms to share carbon credit data. You have just created a significance event that transcends your job title. You are now a market maker. The potential outcomes for a market maker are nearly unlimited. You are the first person headhunters call for turnaround roles. You are the first person venture capitalists call to vet a new investment. You have achieved industrial gravity. Opportunities are pulled toward you because of the mass of your influence. Furthermore, we must address the personal publishing engine. In 2026, the gatekeepers of information have largely disappeared. You do not need a major publisher to write a book. You do not need a television network to have a voice. However, this means the noise floor is incredibly high. To stand out, your content must be deep and technical, rather than broad and motivational. The US market is saturated with hustle culture influencers. What it lacks are sovereign experts, people who can explain the complex intersections of tax law and automation, or biotech and supply chain resilience. By publishing deep dive essays on platforms like LinkedIn or specialized industry journals, you are building a digital archive of your competence. This archive works for you while you sleep, establishing your authority in rooms you haven't even entered yet. Let's look at a case study of a 38-year-old energy consultant named Elena in Denver. Elena realized that while she was an expert in solar integration, the real bottleneck in the industry was grid interconnectivity finance. She spent a year studying the financial models behind grid upgrades and began publishing a monthly interconnect report. She became the bridge between the engineers and the financiers. In 2026, as the U.S. Infrastructure Renewal Act began pouring billions into the grid, Elena was the only person who spoke both languages. She was recruited as an advisor to a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure fund. She didn't get the role because of her resume. She got it because her interconnect report had been the industry Bible for the fund's analysts for 12 months. This is the long game. It is about moving from output to input. You are no longer the one doing the work. You are the one providing the strategic input that dictates how millions of dollars are spent. You are building a career that is anti-fragile. If your industry is disrupted, you are the person people hire to explain the disruption. If your company goes bankrupt, you are the person the creditors hire to manage the liquidation or the reorganization. You are unretirable, because your wisdom and your network are assets that only increase in value with age. In the United States, we may worship youth, but we pay for wisdom. We have now reached the summit of the professional mountain. We have covered the utility of your skills, the power of your brand, the map of politics, the mode of your finances, the optimization of your biology, the psychology of your influence, the scaling of your impact, and the building of your industrial legacy. You have the complete blueprint. But there is one final, overarching philosophy that ties all these parts together. It is the secret of the sovereign professional. the ultimate state of career freedom in the American 21st century. In the final part of this masterclass, we are going to synthesize everything into a Day 1 to Retirement Execution Plan. We will discuss the exit strategy, how to know when you have won the game, and how to transition into a life of pure significance, where you work only on what you love, with whom you love, for as long as you want. We are going to reveal the final equation of career success that ensures you look back at your 30s not as a decade of stress, but as the decade you claimed your freedom. The masterclass is almost complete. The final revelation is next. The state of the sovereign professional is the ultimate realization of the American career path in 2026. It is a point where the traditional power dynamic between employer and employee is completely inverted. You are no longer a person looking for a job. You are a service provider with a proprietary methodology that the market cannot replicate. This is not about leaving the workforce to sit on a beach. It is about reaching a level of autonomy where every professional engagement is a choice, and every project is an opportunity for further compounding of your legacy. To achieve this, we must synthesize the 9 previous layers of this masterclass into a single unified execution plan. This is the blueprint for the final transition of your 30s. Imagine a professional named Thomas, a 39-year-old executive director in Philadelphia. 10 years ago, Thomas was a stressed-out middle manager constantly worried about the next round of layoffs. Today, Thomas operates as a sovereign professional. He holds a part-time advisory role at a major healthcare firm, sits on 2 private boards, and consults for a venture capital group. He works 30 hours a week, earns 3 times his previous full-time salary, and has total control over his schedule. Thomas didn't get lucky. He executed the sovereign strategy. He moved from the fragile single point of failure career model to a decentralized career model. The foundation of the sovereign execution plan is the 3-year rolling pivot. In the United States, historical trends suggest that industries now undergo a major technological or regulatory shift every 36 months. To remain sovereign, you must treat your career as a series of 3-year sprints. Year 1 is for deep acquisition. You master a new high-value skill that bridges the gap between your current role and a future market need. Year 2 is for strategic deployment. You implement this skill within your current organization to create a measurable significance event. Year 3 is for externalization. You take the results of that event and use the executive rebrand and industrial influence strategies we discussed to signal your new value to the broader market. By the time the market realizes a skill is in high demand, you are already 3 years into your mastery of it. Next, we must implement the autonomy equation. This is the final formula for career success in the 21st century. The equation is proprietary logic x scalable systems plus political capital equals freedom. Your proprietary logic is the unique way you solve problems, the logic extraction we performed in Part 9. Your scalable systems are the process moats and force multipliers from Part 8 that allow your work to continue without your manual labor. Your political capital is the invisible map and relationship wealth from Parts 4 and 7. When these 3 elements are in balance, your wealth-to-work ratio tips permanently in your favor. You are no longer trading your life for a paycheck. You are trading your systems and your reputation for equity and autonomy. Step by step, the move to sovereignty requires a ruthless exit strategy from the traditional 9 to 5. This does not mean you quit tomorrow. It means you begin to fractionalize your presence. As you become more efficient through biological optimization and deep work, you will find that you can accomplish in 20 hours what used to take 40. Instead of filling those extra 20 hours with more commodity tasks, you use them to build your expertise derivatives, the consulting, the board seats, and the intellectual property. Case studies of high earners in 2026 show that the transition to sovereignty usually takes 18 to 24 months of parallel building. You are essentially running your own professional services firm inside your current job until the secondary income and market demand reach a tipping point. We must also address the legal and financial infrastructure of the sovereign professional. In the United States, once your income from expertise derivatives begins to match 20% of your base salary, you must shift your corporate structure. This often involves the creation of a personal professional corporation, or an LLC. This isn't just for tax efficiency. It is for professional insulation. It allows you to sign contracts as a firm rather than an individual, which provides a layer of legal protection and allows you to participate in B2B, business-to-business, engagements that are often more lucrative and have better terms than W-2 employment. Historical trends in the 1099 economy show that sovereign professionals who operate through a corporate entity have higher potential outcomes in negotiations because they are perceived as a strategic partner rather than a hired hand. Consider the imagine if scenario where your current employer undergoes a massive restructuring. Most people would be in a state of panic. But as a sovereign professional, you have diversified professional revenue. You have your LLC, your board seats, and your consulting clients. For you, the restructuring is just a signal to renegotiate your contract or move your primary focus to a more profitable client. This is anti-fragility in action. You have built a career that actually gains from volatility. The final stage of this masterclass is the transition from success to significance. This is where you move from building your own career to shaping your entire industry. In 2026, the American economy values those who can convene authority. By hosting industry roundtables, mentoring the next generation of force multipliers, and continuing to publish your sovereign insights, you ensure that your influence outlasts your active working years. You become an industrial elder. This is the highest level of professional achievement. It is a state where you are respected not for your title, but for your wisdom and the systems you have left behind. As we close this 10-part deep dive, you must realize that the successful career in your 30s is not a destination. It is a high-performance vehicle that you must constantly maintain and upgrade. You now have the tools to audit your utility, rebrand your identity, navigate politics, build financial moats, optimize your biology, influence others, scale your impact, and leave a legacy. The American dream has evolved. It is no longer about a gold watch and a pension. It is about the sovereign professional who owns their time, their mind, and their future. The 2026 job market is a predatory environment for the unprepared. But for the individual who has mastered these 10 pillars, it is a landscape of unprecedented opportunity. You are no longer a victim of the mid-career crisis. You are the architect of your own professional destiny. The data is clear, the case studies are proven, and the roadmap is in your hands. Now the only question that remains is, which pillar will you begin to reinforce today? The journey into your 40s and beyond will be defined by the foundations you lay in this decade. If you have followed this masterclass in its entirety, you are already ahead of 99% of your peers. You have moved from playing the game to changing the game. But knowledge without execution is merely a hallucination. In our next deep dive series, we will transition from career strategy to the mechanics of peak wealth accumulation, showing you exactly how to invest the surplus capital your new career will generate to ensure that by the time you reach 50, work is a hobby rather than a necessity. The evolution continues. Stay focused, stay sovereign, and keep building.